You unlock this door with the key of compassion. Beyond it is another world, a world of science, a world of common sense, a world of sanity. You're moving into a land of both empathy and ethics, of nutritional knowledge and empowerment. You've just crossed over into Dr. Osborne's zone. All right, welcome to Dr. Osborne's zone. I've got Farmer Joel with me of Polyface Farms up in Virginia. I was blessed to be invited to come up there a few years ago and speak, and got to tour the farm. A wonderful place, lots of healthy animals, lots of fresh air in the mountain. Joel, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. It's really a delight and an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
So let's dive into farming. I think one of the biggest questions on people's minds is we have all these kids that are being taught in school today that in order to save the planet, they somehow need to sacrifice eating animal meat and eat soy-based or pea protein-based, what I call fake meat or garbage. And it's almost like they're being mentally hijacked, that the role of saving the planet is on their shoulders, and the only way they can accomplish that is by not eating God's green animals. So what's your take on that? Walk me through that a little bit. I know you're an animal farmer, so.
Yeah, we have livestock, a lot of livestock, but they're not raised like the conventional approach. So, when you see these documentaries like What the Health and Cowspiracy and these things, I'm one of those people that the first half of it that is decrying the negatives of industrial confinement animal production. I'm sitting there saying, amen, preach it, it's all good. But in the second half, when they start to looking at, well, what's the solution? And they say, well, veganism is the solution. I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. Let's not blame the animals. I think it's important for us to understand that 500 years ago, North America had more pounds of animals on it than it does today, including the people. If we took all the people in North America and all the animals and all the Tyson chickens and all the Iowa beef packers beef feedlots and all the confinement dairies, we took all the animals in North America today, including people, and weighed them, we had more weight 500 years ago than today. Now, that should give anyone who's actually thinking, it should give you pause right there. You should say, okay, all right, that means somehow 500 years ago, not only was there a tremendous amount of abundance in production, but somehow it was done in a way that didn't destroy the planet. I'm not talking about weight of plants or weight of trees. I'm talking about weight of animals. And just so everybody understands where I'm coming from, we had 200 million beavers. They ate as much vegetation as all the humans in North America today. We had a couple 100 million bison, more than all the cows in the U.S. today, including elk and deer and, antelope and mountain goats and all those things. And then we had massive flocks of birds. Audubon sat under a tree in around 1800 and recorded in his diary that he couldn't see the sun for 3 days because the flock of passenger pigeons flying over. Imagine a flock of pigeons so big and dense that you couldn't see the sun for 3 days. And then finally we had somewhere between 1 and 2 million wolves, all of whom needed 20 pounds of meat a day. And so I'm not saying the humans ate all this. What I'm suggesting, though, is that the total production of animals and the poundage of animal weight, we now know, exceeded all the weight of the livestock, all the weight of the wild animals, and all the weight of the humans in North America today. Well, how in the world was this done without destroying the planet? And so as soon as you start looking at the way animals worked, what you see is that they, number one, they moved. They weren't in confinement. They actually moved across the landscape, and they moved in a strategic choreography. They didn't just wander around. Native Americans, of course, lit fires all the time to draw them in, because animals liked to lick the charcoal left from fire. And so fire actually, unlike Bambi, the flames themselves, animals would go away, but even before the smoke stopped, even before things got cool, animals would come in and gnaw on and chew on the charcoal left over for minerals, for detoxification, all those kinds of things. So the fires not only freshened up the ecology, but they also actually attracted animals back in for hunting, for food. And so the animals moved, and then there was a predation effect. The coyotes moved them and pushed them across the landscape. Flies pushed them across the landscape, so they didn't stay in the same place. They were moving all the time. And then there were a lot of different kind of species together. They weren't segregated. They were, you had elk and deer and bison all together. You had all different kinds of birds with the herbivores. Like today, we see the egret on the rhino's nose. There's a symbiosis between the bird and the herbivore. And so, we see that very complex symbiosis. The beavers hydrated the landscape. 8% of North America 500 years ago was water. We're less than 4% today. So we've dropped we've gone from over 8% to less than 4% since the Europeans have come, and we've wiped out the beavers. That hydrology obviously created a huge difference in evapotranspiration, cloud formation, thermal mass to maintain ambient temperature stability, all sorts of ecological things there with the hydration. So you add those things up, and I think the starting point of the discussion is just to realize that whatever negatives you're reading about today with modern conventional agriculture, they're both very modern, very recent, and they're also very unnecessary. That's the critical thing. They're unnecessary. And so on our farm, we move the livestock every day. We move chickens every day, turkeys every day, cows every day. They don't stay in the same place. We let that forage, go through its long growth stage, so that it actually metabolizes a lot of carbon and sequesters that carbon in the soil. We've gone from 1% organic matter to over 8% organic matter in half a century here. That's taking the carbon out of the atmosphere, putting it in the soil. That's what this choreography did in the animals moving, mobbing, and mowing, across the ecosystem. So I liken this whole thing, where we've come to, for example, let's say you and I, Dr. Peter, let's say we lived on Pluto. We're looking down at the Earth and saying, I wonder what kind of education system they have down there. So we volunteer to get in a flying saucer. We fly down to the Earth and we land in this schoolyard. And it happens to be a schoolyard from a school district that has the worst superintendent in the school district. And the school has the worst principal. We go visit the classroom with the worst teacher and the worst kids in it. We go back to Pluto. They say, "Well, what'd you find?" We'll say, "Well, my lands. They shouldn't even do education down there. It's so terrible." And so we wipe the whole thing off because we haven't visited the good places. And so the data points that folks are using, and I don't want to get into conspiracy and there's a anti-animal, let's just leave that out of it for a minute. But the truth is that the data points that these folks are using are garnered from a dysfunctional system. And if you garner your data points from a dysfunctional system, you're going to end up with a very dysfunctional result.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, demonizing the entire profession of animal farming over the mistakes of mass production, scaled agriculture using chemicals and everything else that we know has destructive properties is not a great starting point. How did you get into, we call it regenerative farming, I think is the term that's largely being used or that we're hearing. I mean, I just say, I call it common sense farming, where you take good land stewardship and good animal stewardship in mind first.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah, my grandfather was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine in what it came out in 1948, something like that. So my dad got that, kind of ecological bent. My dad was an economist and was, trained in business practices, and he saw that chemical approach as essentially a drug addiction. And that you were on this treadmill and you simply can't run faster than the elevating cost and the elevating toxicity of the chemicals. And so very early on, he said, well, let's look at nature for nature's templates. If you're gonna bet on a horse race, there's two horses racing, and one of them has never been proven, and one of them has won all 5 of its races. The one to put your money on is the one that won the 5 races. And what we've got here, we've got nature's template that has been winning races for millennia. But everybody has thrown their hat in the ring to bet on a horse of chemicals and confinement housing and antibiotics. They've thrown their horse in that their hat in that ring instead of the horse that's actually been proven over the centuries to be more abundant and more more productive and more regenerative. And so essentially we view nature as not a reluctant partner to be hogtied and I'm gonna make you do this, and produce whatever, but rather we view nature as a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places. And that's a very different view, of the way this all is. The other thing is, I think that philosophically, the chemical approach is a very mechanistic approach to life. You and I know that like, well, just let's take our microbiome and think about all the spontaneous decisions that are going on between microbes. I'll trade you this for that, and there's all this spontaneous voluntary choice being exercised within our own bodies, in our own cell structure. And to say that all of this magnificence and mystery that we call life is just nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus in different rearrangements, and it's as mechanical, and the DNA is as mechanical as a bearing in the front wheel of your car, does not respect at all the spontaneity, the dynamism, the diversity, the pulsing of life, as opposed to inanimate, industrial, which is mechanization, routinization, specialization, and simplification. Life is completely opposite that, and so the whole idea of chemical fertilization, for example, comes at it from you don't need life to make life. We can make life out of sterility, and you can't make life out of sterility. You have to make life out of something that lives, dies, decomposes, and then regenerates into life again. A compost pile is a beautiful example of that. You put this living stuff, you put it in there, it's dead, and it decomposes, and then it actually fuels the next iteration of the plant, and starts that cycle around. So that's a cycle that just goes round and around and around.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To me, it's like the pharmacy industry tries to manipulate symptoms through chemical intervention by suppressing, the body's wonderful machine, without respect or regard to why the symptoms exist. And it's, I look at big agriculture much in the same way. They've grown things in higher volume and grown things that are less nutrient dense, consistently growing enough to feed the masses, but growing enough to feed the masses very, very poorly with the quality of food that's being produced today. And it's starting to show up. It took a few decades for it really to catch up and see all the major flaws in that system.
Yeah, well, the truth is that life is very forgiving, and we can be very thankful about that. You can say an unfit word to your spouse, and you can ask forgiveness, and you can go on. Life, thankfully, life is very forgiving, and it can take a fair amount of abuse. Actually, look at people and how they overcome issues with enough forgiveness and enough vitality there. And I think the other thing that, as you mentioned, big ag and they just want to throw it like the drug industry or pharmaceutical industry. I'm struck by the similarity in the externalized problems that these things create. In pharmaceuticals, we call it side effects. You take this drug for this malady, but then there's about 20 things. Well, it might make your heart palpate. It might, it might give you a rash. It might get, whatever. And you have all these external costs. And the same thing is true in agriculture. When you use the modern orthodox view to mechanical agriculture, let's put all the chickens in a house. Well, now we've got to use a lot of petroleum to bring the feed to them, and we've got to use a lot of petroleum to get the manure out. And the manure is so concentrated, it becomes a pollution problem. Now you have a fish kill, and it just and because the chickens are all cramped up, you got to use some antibiotics to keep them from dying in the fecal particulate. Well, now the antibiotics make MRSA and C. diff, which are superbugs that then create additional infectious problems in the hospital. And it just the beauty of nature's templates is that it doesn't give you bad side effects. You have to work really hard to get a bad side effect from compost. You have to work hard. You have to work hard to get a bad side effect from a cow eating clover. You have to work really hard at making a chicken sick when it's got fresh air, sunshine, and green grass to run around in. Those things just don't have bad side effects. And I think that I agree. I appreciate very much you're drawing the similarity between the two things.
Yeah, we call it functional medicine, and again, the buzz term, right, is regenerative agriculture. Talk to me a little bit about the possibility, because you have, I think it's 900-acre farm. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's somewhere in that neighborhood.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And you have regular production of beef and pork and chicken and turkeys. And when I visited last year, it was fantastic. The food was fantastic. The grass was beautiful and green. The animals looked pretty darn happy. What's the solution? Because you take, it's again, drawing the similarity. I look at doctors, and what's the solution for them in that hospital system? How do they come out of that system where they're able to practice with freedom and autonomy and being able to make the best choice with their patients? And in the same way, what's the best decision that a farmer today, maybe even watching this, that is maybe trying to move away from that model and doesn't quite understand how they can make it work financially? Because these are people, right? These farmers are people. They've got families, they've got debts, they've got they've got bills just like everyone else. And regenerative agriculture, I hear this time and time again, and I've got farmers in my family. It's just not possible to make it profitable. And so they keep staying on that treadmill, as you so eloquently put, that treadmill that you can't outpace, where every year they have to take on tremendous debt to stay in business. And how did you do it? How did you go about doing it and proving all of them wrong?
Yeah, well, it's not a short story, but I think if I could kind of distill it, different people come to it from different perspectives. You know, in our family, mom and dad worked off the farm and paid the mortgage. So as I came into my late teen years, the farm was paid for. So I didn't have to, you know, pay for the land. Now there are plenty of people who have inherited land and still lose their shirts farming. So, you know, just because you have, I mean, there are people every day that have their farms paid for that are losing their farms as well. So there's nothing about having land itself that makes it different. So what are some of the things? Well, first of all, you know, realize we don't have a vet bill. We don't have, think about things we don't have. We don't have a vet bill. We don't buy any chemical fertilizers. We don't buy any pesticides, herbicides. We don't have a plow. The average farm in America has $4 worth of depreciable infrastructure. That's buildings and equipment, not land, just buildings and equipment. $4 worth of depreciable infrastructure for every $100,000 in annual gross sales. In other words, a farm that takes in $100,000 a year has $400,000 in depreciable buildings and equipment. At our farm, it's 50 cents to a dollar. That's an 800% difference in depreciable infrastructure versus income. Why is that? Well, it's because our infrastructure is largely portable. So we have portable chicken shelters. So it's mobile infrastructure, it's modular infrastructure. So we scale not by building a great big $500,000 confinement house. We scale by starting with one and then duplicating. So we rather than centralization, we have duplication as a scale. So we have enough chicken shelters out there to have as many chickens as a Tyson chicken house. All right, but there's 210 modules that were built over years with cash flow and no debt. And then the next thing is, of course, direct marketing, value adding. So, we've all heard the farmer say, oh, that's the middleman makes all the money, right? That's where all the money goes. And it's true. If you take the retail dollar and you say, well, what components go into that retail dollar? It's production, processing, marketing, and distribution. Those are kind of the four big categories that make up that retail dollar. And so the average farmer, of course, is only getting the portion that's from production, which is a very, very small portion of that dollar. In fact, in Wheaties breakfast cereals, there's more money in the cardboard of the box than there is in the in the wheat that went in the Wheaties, right, or the cornflakes. So our approach is, well, as a smaller farmer, if that's where the money is, then I want to be a middleman. So we wear the hats of the processor. So we butcher chickens. We wear the hat of the marketer. We call customers. We develop a brand. We wear the hat of the distributor. So we have a couple trucks. We distribute to the city. We have these customers. We ship nationwide. Now that started in 2019. We started shipping nationwide as the whole logistics of distribution got to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and contactless retail became a thing. And so the distribution, marketing, and processing are not subject to the four horsemen of the apocalypse that confront the farmer, which is weather, price, pestilence, and disease. That's what all the farmers are. That's why farmers say, oh, I'm different than everybody else because of weather, price, pestilence, and disease. But when the grasshoppers come, they don't eat the rubber tires on our delivery truck. When the drought comes, it doesn't destroy the stainless steel tables that we're butchering chickens on. You get what I'm saying? So every dollar that we can load into processing, marketing, and distribution is a dollar that's not subject to those vagaries that farmers feel subject to all the time, that they can't control: weather, price, pestilence, and disease. And so So that gets you off of this volume treadmill where you have to constantly grow and make more and more bushels or pounds or whatever it is, numbers. You have to make more and more numbers, to stay up with it. That's a way to get off. And so the combination of no chemicals, symbiosis between the different animals, using animals to do the work. We build compost with pigs. We run chickens behind the cows to sanitize the fields and spread out the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, using animals as a sanitizer, as a biological sanitizer. That way the animals, not only do the chickens do the work, they lay eggs for us. So eggs are cream of all the animals doing the work. And so, those kinds of very intimate synergies relationally, create big differences. And so, now if there is a farmer listening, there very well may be a farmer listening, and he's just in mortgage up to his eyeballs, and maybe, just can't see his way free. What I would just encourage a farmer like that who's in the throes of it and can't see a way out. First of all, start reading and educating yourself. Don't read the junk from the land grant university. Don't read the junk from, Monsanto. Start changing. If there's a climate that needs to change, it's the climate of the mind. Start changing the climate of your mind first. Okay. And as you start doing that, then you can do some experiments that are small, very, very small. I mean, I've had people do tiny experiments and find them helpful. I mean, like, Dr. Peter, somebody can come in and you can say, just stop drinking Coca-Cola. Just don't drink any soft drinks. And sometimes just that change or that experiment is enough to say, wow, 2 weeks after this, I feel better. What else can I do? And then there's an eagerness to conquer the next thing. And farmers need the same thing. Sometimes for example, if you're growing corn and soybeans, take 5 acres out, put it back in perennial grasses, and get 2 cows and experiment, running them around this just do an experiment, get familiar with it. Look at what your production is, look at what your income is. And when you start with this small experiment, it can often give you confidence, not only confidence to go forward, but an affirmation that this new climate of the mind that you're creating is not into foolishness. It's actually into wisdom, and you're able to move forward with it.
Perfect advice. What is your take? So you guys don't use any chemicals at all. You use animal networking, so to speak, where the animals come behind each other and around each other to help each other out and keep
Right.
as much of a natural process going as possible. Let's talk about then, because you don't use chemicals, we don't see those chemicals showing up in the meat, in the eggs. Can you talk to the nutritional density of, let's say, beef processed from your farm, or pork processed from your farm, or an egg, versus, let's say, the conventional model of scalability of where, you've got a feedlot or you've got a massive chicken house?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things that we know, and we haven't submitted everything we do to every test you can imagine by any means, but we have participated in a few things. We know, for example, that conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, only takes about 14 days of grain feeding to basically chase it out of the body of a beef animal, of an herbivore. Conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, is one of the things that gives our synapses a springiness. Think about, the synapses are like a whip, and over time, as we age, they become more and more rigid, and so keeping the elasticity in those synapses of our nerve endings helps our brain function, our agility, all those kinds of things. So conjugated linoleic acid is, and far be it for me to talk about this like I know what I'm talking about. All I know is that CLA is a lot more in grass-based pastured animals than it is in concentrated feedlot type situations. Another one, of course, is the balance between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which we're learning more about every day, the importance of that balance. And one of the big keys there is the carotenes, the amount of carotenes, the green material. We like to call it the salad, the amount of salad that something gets, as opposed to concentrates like soybeans and corn. It's not that soybeans and corn are evil necessarily. It's because birds, for example, omnivores have always eaten seeds. Seeds or grains. Now we can get into, well, today's grains are different than yesterday's grains. We can get into that discussion, but mainly I'm just suggesting that you have to balance out, with the forages, the salad balances out a lot of those negatives from the other side. We did participate several years back in a really high class nutritional data point on eggs, and our eggs were they picked about 10 nutrients. One was folic acid, and the USDA nutrient label on a dozen eggs, if you get in the store, it'll say 48 micrograms of folic acid per egg, and ours averaged 1,038 micrograms per egg. We're not talking about little nuances of difference, and the nutrients are huge. And I'll mention two other things in this vein. One is that over the years, we service a lot of white tablecloth restaurant chefs. We used to service a lot more. A lot of them went out of business in COVID. But what we learned from all of these outfits that we've serviced is that our meats and poultry cook about 20% faster than what's in the store. And the only thing that we've been able to conclude, and we may be wrong, but this is what all of our research has made us conclude, is that because our animals live in happiness, in a fulfilling, happy, stress-free environment, they don't spend their life secreting adrenalines. When you secrete adrenaline, your muscles tighten up. That's how you get to where you can perform, right? Your muscles get all tight. And so the average animal in the industry in the U.S. spends its life in an emotional, stressful situation. And so its entire life, it is secreting these adrenalines into the tissue. And so it then comes to your plate with all that hardness in it, whereas our animals come stress-free, and so they cook very very quickly and quite easily. And the final thing that I'll say, and so this has actually become a problem when we've tried to market into institutional places like colleges and universities and stuff that have all these cooking protocols. This much temperature for this much time is in their HACCP plan, their hazardous analysis critical control point plan that the health department demands. And so we go in there with our pork or chicken or whatever, and suddenly they overcook it because those same cooking instructions way overcook ours. And they can't adjust it. Well, we've got this plan. It's this is the deal, and so then you can't get in. You can't get in there. And the final thing I'll say, and this is also just a little bit anecdotal, but I'm glad for you to massage it into what's right. If you get like the cookbooks for Dolly Madison and Martha Washington, they both did cookbooks when they were alive, way back. If you look at those recipes, half of the stuff in those cookbooks, we don't even know what it is. I mean, you can find out, but the average person, I mean, currant berries and gooseberries, and there are just a plethora of things in there that are not in culinary lexicon today. And it's because they didn't have Walmart down the street. So if they wanted fresh fruit through the season, they had, 20 different varieties of things that ripened at different times of the year, so that they could have fresh fruit for the table, for example. And Native Americans and Australian Aborigines, we now know, routinely ate more than 2,000 different kinds of food. In fact, the last time I was in Australia, it was really, really interesting. They had just discovered that the Aborigines, the nomadic ones that wandered along the seashore, they would use the same kind of trash pile. So they probably ate around the same place too, some kind of protected alcove there or something, right? And so they had the trash pile. And so when another band of Aborigines would come through, the first thing they would do, they would look at the pile that was there, and if there were three basic kinds. There were shellfish, mollusks, and fish, and depending on the detritus, the skeletons and the scales, whatever was on the top of the pile, they would make sure they did not harvest that to eat while they were there. And so the Aborigines had this rule of rotationally harvesting from the sea. If shrimp was on top, they'd make sure that they just caught fish that time and ate that during that stay as they went through. And that way they kind of rotationally grazed the sea along the beach as they went through. But this kind of diversity in the microbiome is powerful. And so one of the reasons the Native Americans had such variety in their microbiome was because the bison and the elk and the turkeys and the things that they ate were eating a massive variety of things out in the field. A native prairie often had as many as more than 40 species of plants per acre. Imagine 40 species of plants per acre. So that bison goes along and he gets some plantain and some goldenrod and some chicory and some fall panicum. I'm just naming off some species of forages, but all of those have different vitamins, different minerals, different enzymes. At the molecular level, they all have a different energy space, if you will. And so those Native Americans had that variety in. And so I'm encouraging folks today, probably quicker than you can plant currant berries and gooseberries and the variety that Martha Washington and Dolly Madison had, a lot quicker way to get a lot of diversity in your microbiome is to actually eat pastured poultry, eggs, and meat and dairy products that are grass-based, pasture, and that are perennial pasture-based, not
monocrop grass where they plant.
Not monocrops, but polycultures of species within the pasture that actually diversify all those nuances within the meat, the egg, the bird.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that from your perspective, because my perspective being clinical was when we took people off of grain, which is largely the monocrop of the U.S. that feeds 70% of the calorie consumption in the U.S. is from wheat. And when we put people on a larger animal-based diet without grain, what we generally see in their lab work is that their nutrition profiles improve tremendously. Their deficits, of different nutrients are nowhere near as extensive when they expand their diet away from purely grain as the primary staple calorie.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because usually you think, well, I'm going to eat a hamburger, okay? Eat a hamburger, and you think, well, that's one thing. But no, actually, we have the saying, you are what you eat. Well, you also are what you eat. And so if that hamburger is from a cow that was routinely eating 40 different things, that hamburger is going to preserve that diversified nuance into your microbiome way more than just a simple tomato or a simple Triscuit or Twinkie or Cheerio that's just from a wheat plant. That's one plant versus 40 plants coming in, to a beef animal. And of course, obviously I want people to eat grass-finished beef, but look, the fact is that even feedlot beef, more than half of the life of that animal was out on pasture somewhere. They don't go to the feedlot when the calf drops the ground. The calf nurses its mother, and then it grows up and it's finally weaned. Then it often generally goes to a portion of pasture for another 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then it goes to the feedlot. So the feedlot is right at the finishing stage, which I would like to not see feedlots, but even a feedlot beef, I'm saying this painfully, even a feedlot beef has more diversity in it than barley bread.
Yeah, the monocropped aspect of growing, there, especially with soil erosion and microbiome erosion of the soil as they use heavy pesticide, has a tremendous detriment on the nutritional density and health of the food. So I would agree with that. I see far more people doing keto and even carnivore, which in our society we've always kind of been told, or there's always been a hint, and at least for the past 40 years, that somehow that saturated fat from animals is the bane of heart disease and cancer and everything else. We know that scientists corrupted data and lied about all that and covered up sugar as a problem and really looked at the wrong things. But it's just interesting to hear you talk about that diversity. I think about my own property. We don't plant any seed. We don't use any pesticide. And I have a small farm, just real small compared to your scale. But there are, I take pictures and kind of catalog what we've got out there, and we've got natural. We've got a couple of dozen at least different types of flower species, and a number of different clover and some natural garlic, just kind of natural garlic that grows in the ground there. And our cows just kind of graze through it. And of course they're picky. There's only 5 of them. So they kind of take what they want, unlike kind of what you're doing, where you kind of try to mimic the forced eating, quickly so that they can, mow down that grass better. But our land is so diverse. Yeah. And so they're getting so much as they graze from that land that they wouldn't get if we planted just 1 or 2 types of grass, like a winter grass and a summer grass.
Right. Absolutely. And the actual diversity of the soil then expresses itself through that diversity of plants as well. So a soil that's being fertilized with simply nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus actually becomes itself more simplified. So, diversity doesn't grow out of simplicity. You never get the wheel. The wheel can only be as diverse as it starts. If you start with simplicity, it never compensates down the chain of custody. And so if your soil is simply NPK fertilized, it's not going to have very many earthworms. It's not going to. Think about something like Azodobacter bacteria. Azodobacter bacteria is a freestanding microbe that pulls nitrogen out of the air, up to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. But the problem with Azodobacter is that they don't actually become active until the soil hits 4% organic matter. Well, Very few soils in the U.S. now, because of tillage and chemical fertilizer, are at 4% organic matter. Most of them are down in 2% or less. And so all this microbial activity that we'd love to leverage is actually dormant. They're there, they're still there, but they're dormant and not active because there's not enough organic matter in the soil to feed those microbes. In fact, good healthy soil has up to 9 billion, and that's B with a B, 9 billion microbes in it. And right now, we have only cataloged 10% of them. 90% of them are unnamed and unknown. And so, maybe what we need to do is, insteed of having you've heard of the star registry, where you can name a star after your lover or whatever. Maybe we need to have a soil biota registry, where we start naming all these billions of microbes after our loved ones. So the soil is an amazing thing, and of course, and so the more the more microbial activity we get in the soil, then that expresses itself through different kinds of plants, which your cows then have this cornucopia to select from, as opposed to a monocrop of whatever it is.
I mean, humans have suffered tremendously in their health from monocrop consumption. I can't imagine that animals would be too far different. I just came across a couple of research papers analyzing the microbiomes of people and looking at the diversity of different people. And what they found is that gardeners, people who had their hands in the soil, right, on a regular basis, had the most diverse microbiome amongst humans. And we look at like in humans, some of those things that we're seeing on our side, people that are intolerant to histamine or people that are intolerant to oxalate. Well, there's a bacteria that breaks those down. And if we basically destroy much of that bacteria through detriment of the soil, then when people go and eat their food, they become intolerant to aspects that are in the food because they've destroyed the bacteria that helps them actually process it. And again, I can't imagine that animals would be too far different.
No, they're certainly not. And people that follow me know that I routinely drink out of the cow trough. When the cows are drinking out, so I just go up and join them, put my nose down and just drink out of the cow trough. Yeah, it has a few snoodles and a little bit of dropped clover leaves and whatever in it. But I do that. I do that routinely. In fact, in Finland, they've probably done the best research on this, where they've compared sterile urban settings with infants to infants raised out on farms, in close contact with manure and stable cleanings and that sort of thing. And there's no comparison in the health profile of these urban kids and these farm kids. And in Finland, they've actually discussed bringing farm soil into city houses in order to get city kids in contact with exactly what you're saying, with the soil and with the microbial contact. In fact, I've been kind of tongue-in-cheek throwing it out for entrepreneurs that might be out there in the audience. I'd like to see somebody start a we could call it a microbiome stimulation mat, where imagine some permeable bag that, instead of a welcome mat at your front door, it would be some sort of a kind of a flattish permeable bladder that you'd fill with compost, from a farm or soil, and everybody'd step on it. There'd be some dust, kids could inhale a little bit of it, and it'd be like a subscription service. We'll refill your bag every once a quarter, for $30. And build your microbiome. Maybe you can hang it in your house like a punching bag, and the kids can punch on a little bit, breathe in some of that soil dust. No, we say it laughing, but all the research indicates that this is this would actually be a very helpful, healthy thing to do.
Agreed. How many people buy probiotics, right? Yeah. I mean, they buy, and most probiotics on the market are anywhere from really anywhere from one specialized strain to, most of them up maybe 4 or 5 strains. And when you put your hands in the dirt, as you said, there's billions of different species, most have not even been cataloged. And so, how much more effective is God's probiotic versus a manufactured probiotic with limited species?
Yeah. One other just a little interesting point about this is I want to bring to everybody's attention that you don't hear much about is another bacteria. I mentioned Azodobacter, but there's another one. It's called methanotrophic. Methanotrophic bacteria is a series of bacteria, microorganisms in the soil that metabolize methane. So in other words, these are free living microbes in the soil. They're called methanotrophic, and they reach out and grab methane. So, a lot of the anti-animal thing is these cows are burping and farting, and they're going to destroy the planet because of the methane. And so what's interesting about methanotrophic bacteria is that in healthy perennial pastures, enough of those exist to actually metabolize all the methane generated by 1,000 cows per acre. Now, nobody's going to put 1,000 cows on an acre. So there's plenty there to take it all in. But guess what? It's not under overgrazed pastures. It's not under corn. It's not under feedlots. It's not under, chicken houses. Okay. It's only in healthy pasture. So there again, there's another ally that is trying to work with us in a healthy way, that our protocols all basically kick it in the face and say, we don't want you around here, where actually nature has all the answers for this stuff. They're out here, and we simply disregard it. And you don't hear much about methanotrophic bacteria or how to activate. You would think all these people are concerned about methane. They'd say, well, man, how do we activate methanotrophic bacteria? It's here for it's here for use. Let's leverage methanotrophic bacteria. But they never even mention it as if it doesn't exist. But it actually does exist, and it's extremely efficient and efficacious in pulling down all that methane, including the methane that's generated in wetlands. 80% of all the methane on the planet is generated in wetlands. And so here we've got the the EPA and the Department of Environmental Quality. They're trying to preserve wetlands and even make more wetlands, make sure we don't ever lose a wetland. But a wetland, the wetlands generate 80% of the methane. So, it's the planet is an amazing place. The world works actually pretty well. And the thought that a bunch of agenda-driven elite academics can sit here and techno-sophisticate us into a different future is a faith that I'm not willing to embrace.
Amen to that. I'd go one step further. I'd say that, from my knowledge, the vast majority of people telling us that cow farts are destroying the planet are the same people that want to perform more monocropping of unhealthy soy and pea protein, to create a market of fake meat, and then use psychological guilt on our children, right? And put that huge burden of it's your job to save the planet, which is tremendously child abuse, in my opinion. I mean, that's not their burden, and you shouldn't put that on them and put that false belief, because what do these people actually know? They've been wrong on every account. If we look historically at all the elements of incorrectness that we've been told with farming and with nutrition, like if you remember, butter was terrible for you. You have to eat hydrogenated vegetable oil that's produced with heavy metal catalysts. Artificial sweeteners are good for diabetics. That's something we were told. Fat is terrible for you. Eat more carbohydrate. In every aspect, in every walk, we've seen the health of our people deteriorate. We've seen other people, though, become extremely wealthy off of those messages, mainly being big ag and big pharma becoming extremely wealthy. And now they're trying to grow and monopolize that with, what's your take on that? So what are the other things besides the soy And the pea-based fake meats, they're doing these cricket farms and these insect farms. What are your opinions or feelings about that?
Yeah, well, it's all the same thing, and I'm so glad that you mentioned. The fact is that I'll just say these people as a pretty, as a generic thing. These people, the Bill Gates of the world, the Anthony Fauci's, the Klaus Schwab's of the World Economic Forum, the Thomas Vilsack's at US these people, their track record is horrible. Including the food pyramid from 1979 that put Cheerios and Twinkies on the foundational level, and so they have been wrong. And you wonder how many times does an outfit have to be wrong before people start questioning. I wonder what they're saying. So I would say this about everything from the crickets to the pea proteins to the Beyond Impossible Burger and whatever. There has never been a more aggressive assault at individual food independence and access. I will say democratic access to food, as this whole notion that your food needs to come from a processed laboratory. The beauty of nature's template, we've been talking about, cows and chickens and pigs. The beauty of all that is that as long as the sun shines and you get some raindrops and you have some soil, you can feed yourself. I mean, that's why in impoverished cultures, animals have such huge value, is because animals offer real-time nutrition. If all my nutrition is coming from grain, I have to somehow harvest it and store it, keep the mice and rats out of it, keep it dry. It's expensive. But if I'm getting milk from a cow, or if I'm getting eggs from a chicken, all right, that's out here eating worms and bugs and scrounging, none of that doesn't have to go through a laboratory. It doesn't even need refrigeration. She can drop that egg and I can eat it today. And in places that have socioeconomic upheavals, where there are mass migrations, people don't carry watermelons and squash and lentils with them. They take a milk cow, they take some chickens, they take a couple pigs. Why? Because that is real-time nutrition that's transportable, that's mobile, that moves with them. And if they don't have that, they take jerky, pemmican. Daniel Boone did not go out to Kentucky with squash and watermelons dangling from his saddlebags. He took something that was so nutrient dense, he could eat a quarter pound of it a day and be satiated. That's dense stuff. How many pounds of lettuce do you have to eat? How many pounds of bread do you have to eat to actually function over time? And so this entire kind of exotic laboratory, crickets, you don't just eat crickets. They've got to get ground up. They got to get processed. They got to be added with sunflower oil and all sorts of things to make them palatable. Somebody actually brought me a cricket bar this week. And so I ate my first cricket bar, and the main thing it has in it is a few crickets, but a whole lot of, sunflower and wheat and soy lecithin and all sorts of emulsifiers and stickers and dyes and things to make it palatable. What's more palatable than a T-bone steak on a grill? That's about as palatable as it gets, right? And so it doesn't need any doctoring. My point is that if all of our food, if these folks had their druthers, from what they're saying, all of us would be completely dependent on laboratories for our food. And that is an ultimate enslavement of a population and a citizenry, when I can't get my food as long as the sun shines and the rain drops and there's some soil outside my window, I can eat. That's the ultimate independent sustenance. And so I see this as a massive geopolitical assault on food freedom, food choice, food access that's truly democratized.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that we have a personal obligation to ourselves, to know where our food is coming from and the quality of that food, and to be able to make that choice. And
right.
If we've learned anything over the last 100 years, is that you cannot ultra process food better than what God can create, through nature. You can't do it. And just like you mentioned, 48 micrograms of folate versus over 1,000 micrograms of folate. That's not a small number. That's not inconsequential. If you,
right.
if you think about that, if every food that you're eating that comes from that level of nutrient density versus your production farm or your scalable ag and your highly processed foods. And we see that, right? We see the health consequences. Autoimmune disease has never been more popular and more prevalent, and cancer and heart disease and osteoporosis and diabetes and obesity. Why? What factor is different? I come from farming stock and know that when you go back in time and look at those people, they were more hardy, they were stronger, they had more physical prowess. They had much more vibrant health than what we have today in society. And here we are in society, struggling to make healthcare a right, when I would argue that healthcare is not a right, it's an obligation, just like finding and finding quality food is an obligation that you have to treat your body with the utmost respect.
Right.
And we're moving away from that as a culture, and we're trying to harness, I just say that we're child abuse. We're trying to harness the children's guilt in order to make it their obligation to save the planet by moving away from food that will actually make their minds critical thinking and helpful for future generations. Because when you take away we see this in third world countries where there's kwashiorkor, protein malnourishment, where they don't have meat, where they don't have animal protein, is we see a lack of ability for those societies to aggressively advance to any great degree, because it suppresses thought, it suppresses brain power, and it quelches it quelches progressivism. And I don't mean that in the modern sense of the term, right?
So, you're talking about genetic progress, intellectual progress, social progress, all those kinds of things. And the studies have been done in Africa, for example, where just an egg a day can make the IQ of students that are just eating nothing but, say, cassava, that can make student IQ jump 20 points in a couple of weeks, just getting an egg a day. That little amount of animal protein. There's the ability of the animal to concentrate and synthesize a multiplicity of things is not duplicated in anything as simplistic as a plant. And I love plants. I love watermelon. I love tomatoes. I have a great deal of appreciation for all sorts of plants. But they're all far more simplistic than the than the eclectic and complexion of the stuff that an animal synthesizes through its gut and its own digestion and its own assimilation. You mentioned all these chronic diseases we have now that we didn't have 100 years ago, and it has struck me that when you come to life, and of course food is life, when you come to life with as great a disregard for all of its majesty and mystery and beauty, like we have in this country. We don't ask how to make happy pigs. We just ask, how do we grow them fatter, faster, bigger, cheaper, as if they're just widgets And in fact, we're researching how to find their stress DNA so we can take out the porcine stress DNA and we can abuse them more, but they won't be stressed about it. A culture that assaults its life that aggressively is going to reap a whirlwind of pushback, because nature bats last. Nature doesn't mess around. And when you shortcut and you cheat nature, nature's going to come back. And so I see the the health deterioration of our own country as being a physical manifestation of the cheating, the abuse, the disrespect that we have now foisted upon our sustenance, our life. When I was growing up, you didn't have to. If you were having a birthday party for your 3-year-old, you didn't have to call around the other moms and say, what can I serve and not serve at the birthday party? Who's got a food allergy? There was no such phrase. The phrase food allergy did not even exist, in the lexicon 50 years ago. Campylobacter, E. coli, Listeria, MRSA, C. diff. I guess we all knew a fat one. We always say that we knew one fat person, but we didn't know a bunch. There weren't very many, and maybe one diabetic, if that. In your circle of acquaintances and all your aunts and uncles and church friends and people around you might have known one, if any. And once in a while you heard about cancer, but it was rare, and now it's just all of this, as we have violated and assaulted the sanctity of life in our sustenance, it is now pushing back to create to balance out ecology's books, if you will.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I don't want to be the one that's creating liabilities in the ecology. I want to create assets in the ecology so that I get assets out on my end.
Amen to that. So I want to ask you one more question, and that's it is a big one, and no wrong answers or right answers here, just your opinion. What is the solution? For food democracy? The biggest argument I hear from the other side is you can't feed in the U.S. This is a U.S. argument. You can't feed 350 million people, with organic farms. And I don't agree with that. But what's your solution? What do you feel like needs to happen, to regain the health and vigor of our nation through food, through farming?
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful question, and I'll just hit a couple of high points. I actually do a 1 hour presentation on that question. So let's just hit a couple of high points. One is to realize that for the first time in human history, we are throwing away 40% of human edible food globally. In other words, we have never thrown away that much food in the past. But we throw it away because it's blemished, because it passes sell-by, because it's got antibiotic residue in it, some chemical residue, whatever. But we're now, for the first time in human history, throwing away 40% of our human edible food. I was talking not long ago with a guy he just come back from Zimbabwe. I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "Well, I went to a green bean factory. They were exporting green beans to the European Union, to Europe." And he said they were taking in 4 tons a day. They were shipping 2 tons and sending 2 tons to the landfill. I said, "Well, what was wrong with the green beans going to the landfill?" He said, "Oh, they were too long, too short, too crooked, too fat, too thin. They weren't picture perfect." And we have that throughout the food system. And so the first thing is to realize that our long chains of custody have created huge waste streams within the system. The planet right now produces way more food than we're eating. Nobody starves because there's not enough food. They starve because the food isn't in the right place. Maybe there's some warlord that won't let a red cross truck come through. There's some geopolitical, social political kind of thing that's disrupting it. They can't fix the road across the cliff in Pakistan, so that the trucks can get in, that sort of thing. Number two is that we have in the U.S. we have 35 million acres of lawn, 35 million acres of lawn, and 36 million acres housing and feeding recreational horses. That's 71 million acres. That's enough to feed the entire population without a single farm. So, so fundamentally, historically, we had integrated food systems. Today, we have segregated food systems. The food is out there, and I don't want to see it, be a part of it. In fact, if you're a farmer, you're in the lowest level of the culture, right? You're a marginalized D student, and there's something, marginalization about farming. And so fundamentally integrating. So every yogurt processing place should have a pig outfit next to it, eating the whey and the cheese, whatever that comes out of that processing facility. I mean, every institutional restaurant, cafeteria should have a flock of 50 to 100 chickens eating the food scraps that lay the eggs that go back into the kitchen. So you close that loop instead of having these, instead of shipping the food scraps off to a composting operation and getting a green award for being greeny composty. So you bring the compost back and raise inedible rose bushes for everybody to look at and enjoy. And I don't hate rose bushes. I'm just saying that it's much greener to actually not compost it and ship it off and grow rose bushes. Rather, feed it to the chickens, and then you eliminate the egg. You grow your own eggs in situ. And so when we start linking up like this, we use LinkedIn and networking, and we use all those now in our sophisticated, internet age, but we have not applied that to our food systems. And finally, I would just say we need to emancipate food. And by that, and I know that's a powerful word, but right now we have food regulations that are very scale prejudicial. And in other words, it's easy to comply with them when you're big, but not when you're small. And if we want to make sure that we don't have empty store shelves and that we have nice, access to food, we need to free up the entrepreneurial. We need to Uberize. We need to Uberize and Airbnbize the food system so that you and I can transact food commerce as voluntary consenting adults exercising freedom of choice without a bureaucrat being involved in that transaction. And if we did that, there would be hundreds of thousands of savvy entrepreneurial farmers and food advocates, culinary folks who would jump in and make sure that we never have empty store shelves. So we have to have a more ubiquitous democratic access within the food commerce space, so that we have way more practitioners, people that are willing, able to practice within the food system. And so those are kind of my three main points. Is we have a very inefficient system right now. We're wasting food. Number two is integration. We need to integrate, not segregate. And number three would be to Uberize our food system so that more and more people can be in the driver's seat and both produce and access that food without a bureaucrat being involved.
Yeah, I think anytime you get a bureaucrat involved, it makes life harder. I mean, last time I went to the driver license bureau, it was a mess. It was a nightmare. And anyway, great information. I really appreciate you taking your time to be with me and to share your knowledge. There's the old connotation. You said the farmers always get kind of socioeconomic into the stick over here, and people kind of, I think anybody listening to you talk today and hearing you talk and most people should know this, that farmers are some of the smartest folks I've ever met. And I would definitely put you in that camp. And I just want to say thank you for doing it right and having a conscience. and making healthy food available for people who are just trying to navigate a hard enough life already.
Right.
Where life is hard, period, but it's so much easier when you have good food and good health.
That's exactly right. And if the wheels fall off of our culture, and there's a lot of concern out there in the culture, if the wheels fall off, the one thing that you don't want fall off is your own health. And so because you can take a lot of hardship and a lot of the Kevin Costner's Postman, you can take a lot of that if you have your health. And so I appreciate you focusing your attention on that, all that you've brought to this. And shameless plug, we do ship nationwide. So if somebody doesn't know where to turn right now and they want to at least try something and then find their local farmer, and sleuth it, we're glad to ship and prime that pump while people are finding maybe a closer source or something like that. But we're glad to be that catalyst to help people jump over that hump.
Where do people find you? Where can they buy your?
Polyface Farms, Polyface, the farm of many faces. Polyface Farms. Just jump on there and the shopping cart, everything will pop up.
Okay, good meat. I've had it. I've tasted it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you, and thank you for the platform. Thank you for your interest and being such a great voice in this. In this movement, we need more.
Absolutely. It was a great talking with you, Joel, and wish you all the best, and look forward to next time I'm up in Virginia, coming by and visiting.
Good. Look forward to having you. Thank you, Dr. Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Osborne Zone. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more content like this. And make sure you come back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at noon 30 for more episodes.